In a century obsessed with power, Princess Diana changed the world through kindness.
HIV does not make people dangerous to know, so you can shake their hands and give them a hug.
People saw the wedding that made her a princess, the fame that followed her everywhere.
Lied and used fake documents to obtain the interview with my mother, made lurid and false claims about the royal family, which played on her fears and fueled paranoia.
And the compassion that made millions love her. But there's a version few ever saw. Written by her own hand. In letters sealed during her lifetime, she left behind her rawest thoughts and fears. After her death, those letters were finally opened, and what they revealed changed everything we thought we knew about her.
This particular phase in my life is the most dangerous. Someone, the name blacked out, is planning an accident in my car, brake failure and serious head injuries.
This is from Diana, in her own words, 10 months before she died.
The making of the world's most loved woman. She came into the world on a warm summer Saturday in Norfolk, July 1st, 1961, the third child of John Spencer and Frances Roche. Park House, her first home, stood on Queen Elizabeth II's Sandringham estate. Diana Frances Spencer grew up seeing royalty not as distant figures in portraits, but as neighbors, the Queen at church on Sundays, the carriages gliding down the drive, and two of her earliest playmates, Andrew and Edward, who happened to be the Queen's younger sons. The Spencers were one of Britain's oldest noble families, their name written across centuries of royal history. That legacy wrapped around Diana from birth, though it never made her unreachable. When her parents' marriage fell apart in the late 1960s, the family's grandeur couldn't hide the pain of separation. She and her siblings stayed with their father, and when he inherited the Spencer noble title in 1975, the family moved from Norfolk to the ancestral seat at Althorpe. With that inheritance came a new title for his daughter, Lady Diana Spencer. It would follow her everywhere, a title that made her sound older, grander, more distant than she really was. At school, she was never the star student, but she was the one people remembered. She first attended Riddlesworth Hall in Norfolk, a small preparatory school tucked among fields, before moving on to Westheath in Kent. Teachers saw what test scores could not measure. She played the piano beautifully, moved with natural grace, and showed a gentle patience that children were drawn to. After Westheath, she crossed the Channel for a brief time at a finishing school in Switzerland, Institut Alpine Vitaminette in Rougemont. She stayed only through the Easter term of 1978 before returning to England with no great fortune or plan waiting for her. By the next year, she was living in London, sharing a flat at Coleherne Court with friends. She cooked simple meals, rode the tube, and worked to support herself. For a short while, she looked after the child of an American couple. Then came the job that would shape her forever, a nursery assistant at the Young England School in Pimlico. There she spent her days kneeling on the floor beside toddlers, painting, reading stories, and laughing at their endless curiosity. The pay was modest, but she was happy. Her co-workers remembered her as kind, grounded, and instinctively gentle, a young woman who found purpose not in status, but in caring for others. Her path to Charles wasn't the fantasy coincidence people imagined. The families had known each other for years. Their friendship deepened in 1980, and on February 24, 1981, the engagement was announced. Standing on the Buckingham Palace lawn, she wore a blue suit and a smile that hid her nerves. On her hand gleamed a 12-carat Ceylon sapphire ring, bordered by diamonds and set in white gold. The wedding that summer was not just an event, it was a spectacle watched by hundreds of millions. On July 29, 1981, Diana walked down the aisle of St. Paul's Cathedral in a gown of ivory silk, its train stretching 25 feet behind her. The streets outside were packed wall to wall, London draped in flags, the air electric with hope. Cameras followed every step, every wave from the golden carriage, every smile from the young bride who seemed both radiant and terrified. When she and Charles appeared on the Buckingham Palace balcony for the kiss seen around the world, the roar that rose from the mall shook the air. For a young woman who had been teaching nursery school just months before, it was a transformation beyond comprehension. In one afternoon, she became Her Royal Highness the Princess of Wales, and the world would never stop watching. Her first year as a princess brought her the title she valued most, Mother. On June 21, 1982, she appeared on the steps of St. Mary's Hospital in Paddington, this time with Prince William swaddled in her arms. 2 years later, on September 15, 1984, she stood there again with Prince Harry. Despite the palaces and the grandeur, Diana's instincts were never royal in the traditional sense. She wanted her sons to have a life that felt real. She knelt beside them on the floor to play, took them to fast food restaurants, and insisted they see ordinary life beyond palace walls. The same warmth she brought to children in her nursery classes now shaped her motherhood. But while she was learning to balance family and duty, the world's fascination was growing fast. In 1983, barely a year after William's birth, she set out on her first major overseas tour, 6 long weeks across Australia and New Zealand. She was 22, still new to royal life, but wherever she went, people flooded the streets. The sidewalks overflowed with flags, cheers, and faces leaning forward just to see her. Reporters raced through the crowds trying to keep up as the young princess smiled and waved her way through city after city. In a break from royal tradition, she brought baby William along, a simple choice that changed everything. Seeing a princess cradle her child under the hot southern sun softened the image of the monarchy in a way speeches never could. In Auckland, a small moment became legend when William gripped a Buzzy Bee toy and laughed as cameras flashed around them. What began as a formal tour turned into a love story between Diana and the world, but love from millions can turn heavy. Every outfit she wore, every glance, every tilt of her head was watched, written about, and judged. Yet she found a way to make it matter. Instead of hiding from the cameras, she turned them toward the people who needed to be seen: the sick, the poor, the forgotten. Hospitals, children's wards, and hospices filled her schedule. She knelt beside patients, held hands, listened, and smiled. Her visits weren't photo opportunities. They were genuine acts of care. The world noticed. Donations rose, attention followed, and slowly, the most photographed woman on Earth turned her fame into a force for good. By the late 1980s, the fairy tale began to show its cracks. The fame that once carried her now weighed her down. Every word she spoke, every shared look with her husband, became tabloid material. She continued her duties, opening hospital wings, visiting schools, attending charity events, but the strain was visible. Then came December 9th, 1992. The Prime Minister stood before Parliament and read a short statement from Buckingham Palace. The Prince and Princess of Wales had agreed to separate. The line of succession would remain unchanged, and both parents would continue to raise their sons and serve the public. For Diana, what came next was not retreat, it was transformation. How Princess Diana took back her life. Separation changed everything. Her home base became Kensington Palace, and in December 1993, she publicly announced that she would cut back on her number of royal engagements. The plan was to focus her time where it would make a difference and reclaim the private life she had nearly lost. Through 1994 and 1995, she turned that promise into action. She became a patron of Centrepoint, a youth homelessness charity. From then on, she could often be found in night shelters and hostels for conversations. She listened before she spoke, asked questions, and remembered names. She carried that same approach into another fight, one that demanded even more courage: the battle against HIV and AIDS stigma. In the 1980s, her visits to AIDS wards had already challenged global prejudice. But during the 1990s, she kept the subject alive when many wished it would fade from view. Her regular trips to the London Lighthouse, a hospice and support center for people living with HIV and AIDS, weren't ceremonial gestures. They were deliberate acts of defiance against fear and ignorance. Then came the interview that changed everything. On November 20th, 1995, she sat down with the BBC for Panorama, a program that would shake the monarchy and the media alike. The conversation lasted 54 minutes and drew almost 23 million viewers in the United Kingdom alone, with an even larger audience watching worldwide. It wasn't just an interview, it was a moment of total honesty that reset the world's understanding of her life. For the first time, she spoke directly about the pressures, isolation, and struggles behind the royal image. Later, investigations revealed that deceptive tactics had been used by the journalist to obtain the interview, something the BBC has since admitted and apologized for. But that doesn't change the impact it had in the moment. Less than a year later, another turning point came. On August 28, 1996, the divorce was finalized. From then on, she would be known as Diana, Princess of Wales, no longer carrying the title of Her Royal Highness. She would keep her home at Kensington Palace, continue her work, and share the care of her sons with their father. That same year, she made another decisive move, stepping away from most of her patronages and all her honorary military titles to focus on the causes she truly cared about. Her circle became smaller, but stronger. Centerpoint, the English National Ballet, the Leprosy Mission, the National AIDS Trust, and her presidencies at Great Ormond Street Hospital and the Royal Marsden. That clarity soon opened a path to something new, a cause she had been quietly learning about: landmines. In January 1997, she traveled to Angola with the Halo Trust, a demining organization working to clear explosives left from decades of civil war. On January 15th, in the dusty city of Huambo, she walked through a narrow cleared path in a minefield wearing protective gear, surrounded by cameras. Then she met with survivors, children and adults who had lost limbs to buried mines. The image of her in a white vest and helmet became one of the defining photographs of her life. On June 12, 1997, she delivered a keynote speech in London at a conference co-hosted by the Mines Advisory Group and the Landmine Survivors Network, a non-profit founded by survivors to fight for policy change and rehabilitation. Just days later, on June 17th and 18th, she flew to Washington, D.C., lending her voice to the American Red Cross campaign against landmines. Even while that campaign took center stage, she continued her steady rhythm of hospital visits, charity events, and dance fundraisers. Then, in late June, she did something bold. She turned her own image into a weapon for charity. On June 25, 1997, she sold 79 of her evening gowns and cocktail dresses at Christie's in New York. The sale raised $3,258,750, all directed toward cancer and AIDS programs linked to the Royal Marsden Hospital and other medical foundations. Then, in early August, she returned to the field, this time in Bosnia and Herzegovina, working with the Landmine Survivors Network. Between August 7th and 10th, she visited Sarajevo, Travnik, and Zenica, meeting families in their homes and listening to the stories of those scarred by mines. Away from the cameras, she poured her heart, her hopes, and her fears into private letters. Those letters would outlive her, and one day, they'd tell a story no one was ready to hear: Princess Diana's death and the secrets hidden in her letters. In July 1997, Mohammed Al Fayed, billionaire owner of Harrods in London and the Ritz Hotel in Paris, invited Diana and her sons to spend part of their summer at his villa in Saint-Tropez and aboard his family yacht, the Jonikal. It wasn't their first encounter with the Al Fayed family, but it was the first time Diana had accepted such an invitation. The trip brought her back into contact with Ahmad Dodi Fayed, Mohammed's eldest son. Dodi was a film producer whose career in Hollywood had included credits on major films like Chariots of Fire and Hook. He and Diana had met in 1986 when Dodi's team played at Windsor against the Prince of Wales's side. Nothing came of it then. They were acquaintances moving in parallel worlds. A decade later, far from royal courtyards and press photographers, that old acquaintance began to turn into something more. In the quiet of the Riviera, under the heat of the French summer, Diana relaxed in a way she hadn't been able to for years. The days were spent swimming, talking, and laughing with her sons, while Dodi's easy charm and genuine warmth gave her something she hadn't known in a long time: calm. By mid-August, that calm had turned into something unmistakable. Paparazzi photos from the trip, taken through long lenses from the water, caught the two sharing a kiss aboard the Jonikal. The pictures raced across tabloids worldwide within days, telling the world that the Princess of Wales, now divorced, independent, and free from palace rules, was in love again. After several weeks cruising the Mediterranean, Diana and Dodi decided to return to London, but with a short stop in Paris. It wasn't a planned event or a state-level visit. It was a personal detour, an overnight pause before heading home. On Saturday, August 30th, 1997, they flew from the Mediterranean coast to Le Bourget Airport in Paris and headed to the Ritz Hotel, owned by Mohammed Al Fayed himself. Their plans were ordinary and private: have dinner, then go to Dodi's apartment at 1 Rue Arsène Housset, a few minutes away from the Champs-Élysées. Because Mohammed owned both the hotel and the apartment, it made sense to stay within that circle of privacy. But Paris wasn't quiet that night. Word had spread that Diana was in the city, and by the time they reached the Ritz, photographers had already gathered at the front entrance. Inside the hotel, the couple tried to continue their evening undisturbed, but the flashing lights outside never stopped. They had reservations at a small restaurant, Chez Benoit, for 9:30 p.m., but as the crowd increased, plans changed. They canceled the booking and stayed in to eat at the Ritz instead. Just before midnight, the couple decided to leave. The idea was to slip quietly out of the hotel and head to Dodi's apartment for the night. To throw off the press, 2 cars were used. One was parked prominently out front, on Place Vendôme, as a decoy. The other, a black Mercedes-Benz S280, was brought around to the back entrance on Rue Cambon. At about 12:20 a.m. on Sunday, August 31st, the plan went into motion. At the wheel was Henry Paul, the hotel's acting head of security. In the front passenger seat sat Trevor Rees-Jones, Doty's bodyguard. Diana and Doty took their seats in the back. From there, the route was straightforward. Leave Rue Cambon, cross Place de la Concorde, follow the Riverside Expressway along the Seine, and drive the short distance to the apartment. As the Mercedes entered the Alma underpass, just before the bridge, the car lost control and slammed into the 13th pillar inside the tunnel. The force of the collision crushed the front of the vehicle instantly. Doty Fayed and Henry Paul died at the scene. Trevor Rees-Jones was thrown forward, but survived with severe injuries. Diana, alive but critically wounded, was pulled from the wreckage and rushed to Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital. Doctors fought for several hours to save her, but just before dawn, around 4 a.m., she was pronounced dead. None of the 4 occupants had been wearing a seatbelt. French authorities opened a full investigation within hours. Several photographers who had followed the car were detained that night, which was standard procedure while evidence was secured. The wrecked Mercedes was impounded, its every component catalogued and tested. Over the following months, forensic experts recreated the crash conditions, studied the road surface, and ran full mechanical diagnostics on the vehicle. 2 years later, in September 1999, French examining judges released their findings. There wasn't enough evidence to prosecute any of the photographers for manslaughter or for failing to assist the victims. The cause of the crash, according to the report, came down to speed, alcohol, and the lack of seatbelts. Still, public disbelief lingered. The idea that one of the most famous women in the world could die in something as ordinary as a car crash was hard to accept. So, years later, Britain launched its own full-scale investigation, Operation Paget. Led by the Metropolitan Police, Operation Paget examined every rumor, every claim of tampering, every supposed sighting, every theory. After years of work, the findings were released in December 2006 in an 871-page report. The report found no evidence of a plot or mechanical sabotage. Instead, it pointed to the same deadly mix the French report had already identified: excessive speed, an impaired driver, and no seatbelts. Using crash test data from Mercedes, investigators estimated the impact speed at about 65 miles per hour. The car's systems showed no sign of interference. The electrical wiring, brakes, and steering were intact. The driver, Henry Paul, had a blood alcohol level between 1.74 and 1.87 grams per liter, nearly twice the legal limit in France. He was speeding through a confined tunnel while being chased by photographers. The investigation also confirmed that seatbelts could have made a difference. In the years that followed her death, new pieces of Diana's private world surfaced: letters, notes, and personal documents that offered glimpses into her thoughts and fears. The most controversial of these came in 2003, when Paul Burrell, Diana's former butler, revealed a handwritten note she had given him for safekeeping in the mid-1990s. In it, she described her fear that someone was planning an accident involving her car, one that would cause a fatal crash and clear the way for Charles to remarry. Investigators checked the letter's origins, compared versions, and interviewed her closest friends. None had ever heard her mention such fears. She had never reported them to her security team, and after re-examining the car and road, no evidence supported the idea of mechanical sabotage. Another document, known as the Mishcon Note, added to the speculation. It was written by her lawyer, Lord Mishcon, after a meeting with her on October 30th, 1995. He recorded that she said she had been warned of an accident. After her death, he turned the memo over to the police, where it remained on file until the inquest years later. Like the Burrell Note, it was treated as evidence of her state of mind, not proof of conspiracy. Then came the most surprising papers of all, a series of private letters between Diana and her father-in-law, Prince Philip. During the 2007 inquest, parts of those letters were read in court. They dated back to 1992 and showed kindness, not anger. Diana thanked him for being honest and supportive, and he replied that he would always try to help her and Charles, even joking that he wasn't the best at giving marriage advice. The letters surprised many who had believed the two were bitter enemies. Even years later, more personal notes surfaced. In January 2017, 6 handwritten letters from Diana to Cyril Dickman, Buckingham Palace's longtime steward, were auctioned in Cambridge. They were tender glimpses into her home life. One mentioned her delight after Harry's birth in 1984. Another joked that he was constantly in trouble at school. Princess Diana was gone, but her presence never left. The world wasn't ready to let her go. How the world keeps Diana's memory alive. The mourning that followed Princess Diana's death didn't fade when the crowds went home. It transformed. The turning point came on September 6, 1997, when millions watched her funeral at Westminster Abbey. From that day on, the The tributes to Diana were created not just to honor her memory, but to keep her spirit alive. London became the heart of that remembrance. The city where she worked, lived, and waved from balconies is now woven with paths that carry her name. One of the most symbolic is the Diana, Princess of Wales Memorial Walk, a 7-mile route marked by 90 circular plaques set into the ground. Each plaque bears her name and a rose emblem, guiding walkers through St. James's Park, Green Park, Hyde Park, and Kensington Gardens. The path links the landmarks of her life, from Kensington Palace, where she lived, to Spencer House, her family's ancestral home. Next to her former home at Kensington Palace, another space keeps her connection with children alive in the most tangible way. The Diana, Princess of Wales Memorial Playground welcomes more than 1 million visitors every year. At its center sits a large wooden pirate ship set in soft sand, surrounded by small tents, carved play structures, and winding paths for kids to explore. Just across the park lies another memorial, the Diana, Princess of Wales Memorial Fountain. Opened by Queen Elizabeth on July 6, 2004, it sits in Hyde Park as an oval channel carved from 545 blocks of Cornish granite. Water rises at the top of a gentle slope and flows down both sides, one smooth and calm, the other rippling and uneven, before meeting in a pool at the base. 3 small bridges cross the stream so visitors can walk right through its center. From above, the fountain looks like a broad stone ribbon, about 165 by 260 feet across. One side represents her ease and warmth, the other her challenges and struggles. Years later, another tribute appeared at the sunken garden beside Kensington Palace. On July 1, 2021, the day that would have been her 60th birthday, her sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, unveiled a bronze statue created by sculptor Ian Rank Broadley. The figure stands surrounded by 3 children, one under her arm, another at her side, a third slightly behind. They represent the young lives she touched through her work in hospitals, schools, and shelters. The statue rests among soft white flowers and low hedges, in the same garden where she often stopped to greet visitors. If the gardens and fountains capture her spirit in physical form, one organization has carried it forward in action. Founded in 1999, the Diana Award remains the only charity established in her name. Its mission echoes a message she often shared with young people, that everyone has the power to make a difference. The charity trains and celebrates young changemakers across the world, runs leadership programs, and leads a major anti-bullying ambassador initiative in schools. Students and staff are taught how to recognize bullying and build a culture of kindness from within. Another legacy, born directly from the global response to her passing, took the form of a fund. The Diana, Princess of Wales Memorial Fund began in the weeks after her funeral and continued for 15 years, channeling the flood of public donations into meaningful projects. Its focus mirrored her lifelong causes, from palliative care in Africa to refugee support and rehabilitation for victims of landmines. By the time it completed its planned closure in 2012, the fund had distributed over £100 million to more than 400 organizations worldwide. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.